morning and welcome back to it. You're tuned into the Now Morning Show, where this morning we're discussing the harmful effects of bad employee management in our spotlight.
Richard Solomon joins us this morning inside the spotlight to talk about the harmful effects of bad employee management. Good morning to you, Mr. Solomon. Welcome back.
Very good morning to you, and good to be here.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm good, This is my time of the day.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm a morning person.
All right, love that for you. So, should most managers be morning people?
I can't see.
But would you say that we have a management challenge in this country when it comes to the way that we treat employees and deal with
Globally, we
employees?
have a management challenge.
Globally?
Globally, yes.
Why you say that?
The data tells us that about between 57 to 75% of people who leave organizations actually leave their managers. And another 30-something% are considering, people tend to, that relationship between the employee and the person they report to is usually one of the more problematic relationships.
What's responsible for that?
Most managers don't know how to manage.
What does it mean to manage? Is it taking care we had to take care of how hard it could be?
Well, so the process is, there's a few things. If you think about how most people come into management, it is by the skill that they have. So they possess a skill to do something, they're very good at it, and they get promoted up the ranks, eventually to the first rung of management, which is probably supervision. So if you listen to the logic, because you are good at a thing, I put you in charge of other people who do that thing.
Right.
And now, if we say, well, what is management? Well, management can be defined as the scientific art of getting work done through people.
Right.
So as a manager, my stock in trade is people. But remember, I have been promoted to being responsible for others because I can do the very thing. Not been promoted because I have the skill of getting work done through people. Therein lies the problem.
Right, but in managing people who are doing the thing that you're skilled at doing, you understand what it takes to get that thing done, not so?
To do it yourself, yes. To do it yourself, but remember...
No, but to get it done. You understand what it takes to get it done from beginning to end.
Sure. However, the challenge is hardly ever there. The challenge is usually in how we communicate, the quality of the relationships. Those kinds of things are usually the problem, not so much in the doing of the thing. Sure, we can disagree on how the work should be done. The problem is not in the disagreement, it's how that is managed. Yesterday I had a call from someone from a particular organization. And his complaint was that he works for a manager, and when he described this manager, it sounded very toxic to me. I have no data, but this was the complaint. And I said to him, well, usually, you can disagree with your manager can disagree with you, but a good manager will say, well, let's talk about why you disagree. And how could we approach this differently? And if you're making a case, what are the merits of your case? Or I see these holes, can you plug these holes and maybe we can try it or not? And we can't try it for these reasons. But that's a very reasonable kind of a discussion versus my way or the highway.
Right.
As an example. And this was just yesterday. And his question to me is, what do we do? Because the entire department is demotivated. His word, disengaged, people are seeking out, those kinds of things. Because it's not the thing, it's not the work itself. It's the relationship between the people and the person who is in charge of that.
How do we even begin to adjust that? Because that sounds like something almost cultural, because you're talking about it happening globally, right?
It's a global problem.
And it's a global problem. So let's deal with us here in Trinidad and Tobago, because we can't fix the whole world right from here, right?
But the problem is because of how we prepare people or do not prepare people to get into leadership or management.
Okay.
Remember, most people, when they go to school for the very thing that we're talking about. Let's assume, right? Or they come into the organization with some basic skills and then they end up in a particular element or part of the organization and they grow and they get qualified and so on and they get better at it. Nowhere in there usually are people being really prepared in any real way. So think about a doctor. Let's use a doctor as an example. I remember having a call from head of a particular emergency room, and he said, I wish I could get all of my doctors to have a certain kind of bedside manner, one, and then the people who manage them now to be able to deal with them in this way that we're talking about here. He said, because usually it's not the medical care, it's not lack of ability, it is the relationships that get in the way. A doctor spends years and years getting qualified, years and years practicing, but is not spending years and years being able to manage and lead other people. The same is true for most professions. There are very few professions that really prepare you for leadership. Now, some organizations do it. They do the work, to prepare people. But the systems of preparing people for careers usually does not include much work as it relates to this thing called managing and leading people. So people are set up with a bent on doing the thing. And out of necessity, you need the thing. But then what should be happening is we should be preparing people now as we see their potential and so on to move into this leadership role.
What does that preparation look like?
Right. So we have to then, before we answer that, we have to say, well, what are the skills that are necessary for managing and leading others?
Well, you mentioned communication.
Right, so that's a good example.
Right.
Being able to, emotional intelligence, saying it very broadly, being able to deal with the collective unconscious, the individual psychology, things that seem to have very little to do with the technical skills. But if you look at the problems that organizations face where it relates to people, those are the things. So the organizations...
Richard, my challenge is that oftentimes when we see people in management positions and we talk to the employees that under them, and like you mentioned, that your example of the toxic relationship, right?
Yes.
I know many toxic relationships that I hear about on a constant basis.
Right.
And one of the challenges that we have is that you put somebody in this management position, even if they didn't come through the ranks and they wasn't doing the thing with you on the ground, they are skilled as a manager. They have a business, whatever degree, and they come to do this, and they've been trained as a leader of some sort, right? And they put into this position, but they don't actually understand the thing that we're trying to do. And that also hinders communication.
So hold on. So here's the thing, right? You said something very interesting about they have a this or that degree. Most degrees don't prepare you. I don't care what you did. If you did a degree, a Master of Business Administration, which is a very popular one, it didn't prepare you for management.
Leadership?
No, I'm telling you, it doesn't prepare you for management in the
So what does it prepare you for?
No, it gives you some base skills. It's like learning to drive. When you get a driver's license, are you a skilled, competent driver?
No, but you're a qualified driver.
You're qualified to be able to now go into the world, and anyone who has driven for years will know that you really learn this thing and how it works on the road.
Just like you learn on the job.
Fine. So if you're saying, for example, and I'll connect that, what you just said was that someone comes into the role and they come from the outside, they don't know how to do the thing. A good manager will start by listening. So if you are the person who does the thing, as a good manager, I don't run in and say, new sheriff in town, I'm a new gunslinger, here I am with my lasso. No, wait, hold on. Let me understand what's happening here from the people who are doing the thing. I always say a wise leader or manager always seeks to tap into the collective genius of their people. And notice I said collective genius, because those people collectively possess all kinds of wisdom. Now, of course, not every idea that surfaces, not every creative idea that comes up we can take and implement. But as a wise leader, you want to listen to that. You don't want to go, I know. Even if you know, even if you've had lots of experience, the nuance of this space, this organization, this culture, this market may escape you. But by listening and paying attention, by being guided and advised by the people around you. Of course, you have a good working brain, insightful, you're able to now think critically, and then you decide, okay, given all that I see, given all that I know, given where the organization wants to go, this is the direction that we're going to take. Some people will disagree, but the way you position the direction, you see, but the way you position it, you don't position it as if, well, new sheriff in town, here's a big hammer, I'm going to now knock everybody down. No, listen, I know some of you don't agree with this. However, these are the reasons I'm going to do this. This is what we're going to do. Let's work it out. I'm going to come back. Let's talk and see how we move forward.
As a manager, when you present that case, right,
Yes.
as beautifully as you put it, you know, this is the reasons that I'm doing this. This is how we're going to grow the company, and we're going to move forward, and everybody's going to win. Everybody's going to be great at it. And the people that disagree with you.
You have about 40% of people will agree right off the bat.
Sure.
Go ahead.
That means 60% of people are disagreeing with you. That's
that doesn't what that mean. What that means is that you have about half of the 60% sitting on the fence.
Okay.
Neither agree or disagree.
All right.
And then you have another 30% who are strong and they're saying,
strongly, they ain't going for it. Do you as a manager spend time trying to convince that 30%? that you should at least be on the fence.
Yeah. Well, it's not so much convince. You'll always have those who say, no, this is not the way, for whatever reason. Maybe they have objective truth. Maybe they have history. Maybe they have emotional connections to the past. Maybe they have trauma. There are all kinds of reasons. But we don't sacrifice the organization on a person or a fraction of the organization's altar. You see? So as a leader, I say, okay, I understand. Let's build a plan. Let's get a representation of the people who are on the opposite of this story. You know, so when we work with organizations that are implementing major changes, I say, well, let's find a couple of people who are absolutely against this to put them on the change committee. We want to know why, how they think. We want their advice because they are the voices that will help us to be able to craft strategies to bring some of the 30% on. Some. Remember, the organization's purpose is to keep itself alive. It's not to please everyone. If you want to please everyone, give away ice cream. You can't even sell it.
Now, I know that, you're not roti, right? You can't make everybody happy.
You can't make everybody happy.
However...
And even some people who eat roti will not be happy.
However, I guess I'm curious about if you have this 30% that's not willing to move. You have the rest of the company that's going forward.
Right.
Yes, you want to hear why they're not willing to move, but some people are just set in their ways, right? They just don't want change.
Yeah.
In that case, as a manager, do you move on, leave them behind, or tell them, come on, we go in, yeah, they're coming or you're not coming?
So there are a couple of things you can do. One, if you have someone in a role, remember the organization doesn't belong to any of these 30%. Right? So if you're in a role, you're meant to do a job. The organization has to change in order to be sustainable. If you are dead set against it as an employee and the organization has said, these are our plans, this is how we're going forward, maybe you need some new skills, here's how we'll tool you up, here's how we'll work with you, and you are dead set against it, then you are at odds with the direction of the organization. It's not your organization. So you now have to make a decision at the individual level. You are a minority, you're not a majority. You know, even if you are a majority, which is hardly ever the case, but you are a minority. So that you have to now decide, look, is this the place I want to be? And as a manager, I'm going to work with you, but I need you to perform. If you're not performing, and the reason for your non-performance is, I don't like how this thing going. Hold on, this is not your house. We have a bigger purpose here. To serve our customers and our other stakeholders, to stay alive as an organization. It can't be we're going to sacrifice the whole thing on your altar. So in a case like that, as a manager, I'm going to monitor your performance. I'll give you all the tools I can to help you to be able to deliver. However, if you decide you're not delivering, then we're going to have to make some decisions about what we do with you. And in extreme cases, sometimes organizations will purposefully, publicly make an example of someone. I've seen organizations do that.
Because is that good? Is that bad?
Sometimes it's
necessary?
not. Sometimes it's necessary. Because sometimes the voices that you hear, for example, we look at social media. And if you listen to social media, you'll think certain things. A lot of times it's not that most people think that. It's just the loudest voices shout that.
You gotta tell me.
Right? So they're shouting and they're shouting. And sometimes what you need is for those voices to be silent. Because we as an organization, and I'm trying to stay away from as a nation, but in some ways as a nation, we need to go in a certain direction, and the loudest voices are not always in our best interest. So we're not going to let one or two of us hamstring the rest of us. That's not wise. And as a leader, you don't have to get upset. You just have to get very clinical about it. I am going to work with you. However, you have to work with me. And if you're not prepared to work with me, this may not be the place for you.
Now, you say that, right? But is there a place you can go to get that emotional training in terms of as a leader, not responding with your emotion after somebody, you present this beautiful plan and you say this is the way forward, and you have 90% of the organization on board, right? Who's was on the fence say, all right, boy, we're going down the road. I like. Let me see what you do.
Right.
And then you have this 10% that decide that they're going to be the loudest. They're going to go on social media and bash you. They're going to bash the company. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to do the other.
Yeah.
How are we moving forward?
Yeah. Well,
how do I not respond emotionally to those criticisms that come loudly? So, how, as a leader, do you say, let me just
so as a leader,
take a breath?
As a leader, in any sphere, criticism is par for the course.
Right.
If you cannot countenance some criticism, you should not be in leadership. If you do not have the emotional strength to hear somebody say, you're not doing it right, I don't like you, you're against me, or, these kinds of attacks that are very often baseless, or even personal attacks, your skin too dark, your head bald, you're old, I'm just making up things. If you can't countenance that as a leader, you shouldn't be a leader, because you're always going to have some criticism. It cannot be any other way. So as a leader, the work starts early. The way I tell organizations is you identify your potentials and we begin to train them. People can learn. People can learn the behaviors, the responses that are appropriate, how to be able to make space between the stimuli that may cause you to react emotionally and your response. People can learn those things. You can learn those skills. We have worked with thousands of leaders over the years. Some learn better than others because not everybody is a good fitter. That's the other thing. But people can learn. But it's an intentional thing. Hold on. And let me say this. It's not an event.
It's continuous.
It has to be continuous.
Yeah.
It's continuous learning and experience. The word training doesn't always capture it well. It's learning and experience and learning again and relearning and topping up that learning in an ongoing.
That's what training is. We're training for life. It's life training.
Okay, so
just like we will continue having this conversation all the time. Every time you decide to come back on the Now Morning Show, we will continue to train
and we need
the nation. We'll train the nation.
We need to.
One conversation at a time.
I like that. Training the nation one conversation at a time.
Yeah, getting a name for the segment now. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Solomon joining us on the Now Morning Show. He's the Managing Director of Development Consulting Center Limited. And this morning we're chatting about management and the effects of bad employee management. We'll take a quick break and we come back with more on the Now Morning Show. Stay tuned.
No more sorrow, no more pain. Tell me where we going. Heaven knows where we going. As we move from the dark to light. Plenty